Welcome back, everyone. We have 3 more panel discussions and 2 presentations left. So for our next panel discussion, we will be talking about future mobility, and our focus is on unpacking the technological and regulatory constraints hindering the development of sustainable mobility in the region. So as the UAE and countries across the region have adopted various sustainable transport methods, the panel discussion aims to touch on the current status of the sustainable mobility market across the region and to assess and propose solutions to the complexities that are hindering its effectiveness in further development. I would like to welcome to the stage our moderator, Jonathan Ceer, Transport Policy and Strategy Advisor at Atkins, and our panelists, Alex Malouf, Executive Director of Corporate Communications and PR at Ceer, Lilia Mezhoud, Senior Project Manager on EV Mobility at TotalEnergies, Frank Bernthaler, CEO of Admiral America Energy, Bassam Mashabatat, E-Mobility Solutions Lead at ABB Industries, and Abhilash Nir, Head of Smart Building and Smart Mobility at Anabuda Commercial Group, LLC.
Okay, so first session of the afternoon after that excellent lunch. So try not to fall asleep, but it's this first session we're discussing sustainable mobility. So it was quite interesting that Dr. Nasser put up, one of the graphs that Dr. Nasser put up first thing this morning, showing the amount of investment going into clean energy is, firstly, the whole investment is going up dramatically, but the amount going into electrified transport alongside renewable energy is absolutely tremendous over the last 2 to 3 years. So mobility and the future mobility is one of the key aspects of the clean energy debate. So we're going to spend 55 minutes talking about future mobility. And we have Alex, Lilia, Frank, Bassam, and Abhilash, who are covering, I think, quite a big range of the ecosystem, the discussion, particularly on energy electrification, whether it's EV manufacture, whether it's electric charging infrastructure and the manufacture or the distribution of that, or how that also links to the wider energy supply issues as well. We are focusing, I think, on electrification in terms of the panel, but the whole area of sustainable transport is actually bigger than that, because it brings in things like the shift between private and public transport and shared transport, for example, how cities are planned in terms of their mobility systems, and also the whole issue of demand, behavioural change, and how people actually use the transport system kind of moving forward. So I think we've got quite a broad-ranging kind of debate. All of that, of course, in the context of net zero, not necessarily net zero 2050, but as has already been said this morning, actually halving emissions by 2030. So in other words, we have about 7 to 8 years to do all the heavy lifting in the mobility system as well as other sectors as well, to really decarbonise our activities. So there are a number of topics that we're going to discuss, and I'm going to kind of guide the panel through that. If people have questions, we'll pause halfway through for you to ask questions and to raise points as we go. But we're going to start really by just going across our panel here. Firstly, to introduce themselves better than I can, but also your organisation and your activities and why those activities are relevant to clean energy, decarbonisation, and, as I say, this wider topic of sustainable mobility. So we'll start, Frank, with... Absolutely. So we'll start with Lilia from TotalEnergies.
Yes, sure. I don't know if it's working, right? So my name is Lilia Mezhoud, and I've been working for TotalEnergies for almost 10 years now. TotalEnergies is an energy company. So our strategy in a nutshell is articulated on two objectives. So our first objective is to produce more energy to cater the global demand. And our second objective is to produce less carbon emission. So it's producing energy with a less carbon emission. This is in a nutshell our strategy. And for that purpose, we are investing massively in clean energies, in solar, in wind, but not only wind and solar. We're investing also a lot in alternative fuel, e-fuel, biofuel, and even hydrogen. When it comes to the e-mobility, TotalEnergies is a strong player in Europe, in Asia. We have a strong presence in the cities and countries in Europe, and recently also in Asia, China, India, and most recently in Singapore. And we are strongly contemplating the UAE and the Middle East in general territory. And so this is actually what we would like to explore in the UAE. Our strategy when it comes to the e-mobility is based on two pillars. Our first pillar is a widespread of charging facilities and charging infrastructure. So for us, it's really a must to develop the charging infrastructure. And our second pillar when it comes to the e-mobility is really the development of the storage and the battery. Not only EV battery, but storage in general. We believe that for the renewable energy, the storage storage capability and the storage domain will be a key for the development and for the renewable energies to evolve. So this is this is a presentation of my company and what I'm doing. What I'm doing currently is in charge of the development of the electric vehicle infrastructure, charging infrastructure within the Middle East. I'm coming from a different background. I'm coming from a legal background. I used to be the head of M&A for Asia Pacific, based in Singapore. And here I am in the UAE trying to develop the electric charging infrastructure. So I'll pass the mic
to Frank. Can you hear me? Good afternoon. My name is Frank Bernthaler. I am the CEO of Admiral Energy. Admiral Energy is a 3-year-old startup, and basically we are the regional distributors of electric commercial vehicles, buses, vans on the one hand, and charging solutions on the other hand. So we are able to provide a complete ecosystem to our customers. Why do I say ecosystem? Because in contrast with the passenger car world, where a dealer sells you a passenger car without worrying about too much about where you charge that car. You can charge it at home, you can charge it at the mall, etc. On the commercial vehicle side, it's a completely different ballgame. And this is interesting. This is a huge challenge for me. I'm an over 30-year-old veteran in the Middle East now, 15 years, been with Daimler for 23 years, worked on the retail side, and was a CEO of the Al Fahim business, automotive business in Abu Dhabi. So for me, that's new, but it's challenging and it's exciting. But I guess what this panel hopefully will provide is create the awareness of what needs to happen in order to eventually reach the goals which have been set.
Okay, before I say anything about myself, I'm going to ask you a question. Let me see how good our communications has been. Who's heard of Ceer? Okay, a couple. Okay, we need to do a little bit of a better job. So Ceer is Saudi Arabia's first electric vehicle brand. It's really as simple as that. It's obviously more than that. What we are trying to do is design and manufacture sedans and SUVs which are mainstream in the kingdom and for the wider region. So we are doing something which has never been done before. We are a joint venture, which is also pretty unique in terms of who the partners are. Majority owned by Public Investment Fund in Saudi Arabia, and also minority partner is Foxconn. And our aim is a couple of years' time to have sedans and SUVs on the road. And you know, it's not just building up a brand, we're also looking to build an industry in the kingdom. There's many other players who have said they are going to come in. We have Lucid, we have others. I'll ask you another question in a bit. So I want to see how much homework you've done. But really, Saudi has big ambitions in terms of building up an automotive industry which is EV focused, because they're looking to the future. In terms of me, being around, being part of ABB, it's almost like the ABB segment over here. This is ABB half of the panel, but worked at ABB, also worked at Schneider Electric as well. And it's a pleasure to be part of this panel and driving, excuse the pun, but driving the industry forward.
So I am Bassam from ABB Industries. I'm leading the e-mobility segment for UAE and OC country, we call it. It is simply GCC without Saudi, because Saudi is bigger than whole GCC market. I started my career as a renewable engineer, so it's become part of my personality, the renewable power, renewable energy. I feel like every electrical engineer work to look in this direction. Then, I can say 3-4 years back, I joined ABB in the different segment, and recently I become one of the e-mobility team. ABB, it's a 130 years old company. It's not a new company. It started with the steam engines manufacturing. So from that ages, they continuously develop their field to match the demand of the market, the demand of the world. And recently in 2010, we have opened our e-mobility department where we are manufacturing the, we started with the first electrical vehicle, I think it was Nissan Leaf, and we started developing the 50 kilowatt fast charger. And from that day till 2021, we have released the fastest charger in the world. And we are continuously developing our system to charge different type of vehicles, from passenger to heavy vehicle to buses and boats, any electrical vehicle, regardless where you will drive it, we'll try to support you with a charging system.
My name is Abhilash G.T. Nair. So I'm actually the head of MENA Mobility. It's part of Al Nabuda Group. So we are a 62-year-old, in fact 63-year-old, Emirati family-owned business. We are into multiple sectors, including commercial vehicles, electricals, construction, name it, we're there. As part of MENA Mobility, I'm the head of smart cities for Al Nabuda, where we do electric vehicle charging solutions, along with ABB, who's a partner we are, and also warehouse automation and robotics, autonomous vehicles, autonomous cargo, you name it. Anything that runs on electricity, we are there. So we've already worked with several OEMs in the market, providing some of the first fast chargers in the region, including for RTA, where we have done the first electric bus pilot project. We provided the charging system for that. We've also installed the first 175 kilowatt chargers, and of course, as Bassam said, we are here to integrate more of their chargers for the customers. We work with multiple customers across every segment out there, not just automobile. We have greenfield, brownfield, fleet, and any other segment out there. So you want an EV charging solution, we are there. You want EV chargers, we are there. You don't have enough power, you want energy storage to support you, we are there.
So basically, we do the engineering behind it. We work with you closely to your needs, and we provide the end-to-end solution as a turnkey provider in the market. Personally, I've been, as Alex said, so I'm an ex-ABB myself. So I've handled the business development and marketing for India and 5 other countries before moving to the UAE 3 years back as the head of smart cities. Personally, this is my 15th year into renewable energy. I'm an MS and MBA into all these sustainable technologies. I'm also a globally certified project manager, as of 2012. So you can see where I come from. So I have both business development and project management capabilities. So you want a project, we are there. Over here, in fact, looking at the future and the panel here, EV charging is not just one product, one solution. It's an integration of cars, it's an integration of standards, it's an integration of equipments. It's an integration of building loads, building equipments, and of course, the customer requirements. So when you talk about integration, engineering becomes very key to the complete requirement. And depending on the segment, the engineering also varies based on the requirements. So I'm here to see, how well the market has also evolved, and we would like to, challenge ourselves in more important infrastructures as well.
Okay, so I think that's a good kind of round robin to kind of kick things off. So just to start the discussion going, and I'm going to focus on effectively vehicles, then we'll move on to infrastructure, then we'll cover policies and regulations and the role of the private sector versus the public sector. And then finally, we'll have a more general, I think, discussion around sustainable mobility and what it is and what else needs to happen. But we stay on the electric vehicles, and I think we'll start with you, Alex. We constantly hear that the next decade will be the decade of the EV, and arguably that's going to be the biggest single transformation in road transportation, bar none over the next few years. Some countries, of course, have said there is now a target year for the phasing out of sales of petrol and diesel. From a early manufacturer or kind of a startup perspective, what do you see as the main challenges or barriers to the take-up of electric vehicles? And let's stay focused on private light vehicles, so the sedans and the SUVs you're talking about, either generally or more specifically here in the GCC.
So if you look at, first of all, sales in countries like Norway, UK, the stats for last year, over half of the cars sold in the UK were electric. Being back home in summer, I didn't see any ads for anything which was not an EV. And it's obvious the brands are really, really pushing hard. What is also interesting is governments in many parts of the world, especially in Europe and North America, are also pushing very hard in terms of that transformation. I was just writing down before the number of regulations and incentives you have in places like Europe in terms of paying for, or basically supplying money for chargers. In most of Europe, you essentially, or they cover the entire cost of putting up a charger. You've also got major incentives in terms of the cars themselves, which has also been helped by the price drops over the past couple of weeks. You've also got scrapping incentives for your petrol, diesel car. And we're also seeing now places like the UK, regulations when it comes to builds. So new homes have to have charging infrastructure. There needs to be charging infrastructure ready at the very least in terms of parking. So very forward thinking, very progressive, and very much, my hope is that we're going to see similar regulations being pushed out over here. But we have some support in terms of the UAE when it comes to purchasing an electric vehicle. But again, if you compare it to what we see in Europe, I think we have some way to go. So again, the hope is COP28 this year, EVs is going to be a big part of going net zero when it comes to carbon emissions. We've got to push hard. We're going to see similar pushes in much of the GCC, especially in Saudi. There's going to be a big shift in terms of how Saudi is going to transform in the next couple of years. So really that's what we've got to think about. You know, what do governments need to do? Many businesses see the benefits, especially multinational businesses. They've already made their pledges in terms of going net zero with their fleets. And what we've got to do as a manufacturer is also reach out to the public and tell them about the benefits of the car from a practical aspect, in terms of total cost of ownership, in terms of, now I think the challenge we have in our region is the issue of subsidies on petrol. The UAE has moved faster in many ways because the subsidies have been removed. In other parts of the region, the subsidies are very much there. But generally, we're very bullish, we're very optimistic in terms of where we are headed when it comes to EVs, but we need to all move in the same direction. Otherwise, we are not going to get to where we should be in terms of net zero, in terms of other elements as well. And obviously a big part of that is also the infrastructure piece, which I'm sure you're going to touch on.
Which we will get on. Just to follow up on one kind of supplementary, because I think people will be interested in this, is designing an EV for somewhere like Saudi, where you have air conditioning, where you have extreme summer temperatures. Is it harder to do it here than compared to doing it in Europe?
Everything's easy in the Gulf, you know that. Look, there are unique challenges, but I'd say that's reality wherever you are based. There is always going to be something specific to a certain geography. Our advantage is that we are designing and manufacturing for Saudi and the wider Gulf. So you think about HVAC, you think about heat, you think about, for example, the Arabic language as well, other elements which come into this. So there's a lot that we would like to do, and we will do, which will mean that the cars are different from anything else you'd find on the road.
Okay, so just staying on the vehicles for a minute and just moving across to Frank, because you're focused not on private cars, you're focused on larger commercial vehicles, the trucks and the buses. And there has been debates and some discussion about if you want electrification of road transport, one of the fastest ways to get it is for the conversion of large commercial fleets, because you have to convince fewer people. It's possibly more complicated, but you can make more of a dent by going for the larger commercial fleets. Just your reaction to your view on that, and also as someone who is trying to convert and electrify large commercial vehicles here, again, what are the specific challenges, either the same or different from trying to do this for light vehicles?
I think in terms of challenges, we share the same thinking, the same thought, because there's no incentive to purchase an electric truck or an electric bus. I think that is one of the biggest things we see, because at the end of the day, you know what, an EV, a car, you buy it, you get emotional, you have the money to spend, you enjoy it, etc. With a commercial vehicle, you want to make money. And if that commercial vehicle is 3 times a conventional diesel truck, and your total cost of ownership extends to 6-7 years, then you really have to be very convinced that this is the right thing to go at the moment. So that is a challenge. Legislation or lack of legislation has been a challenge for us. I mean, we brought in an 8-ton truck from China, fully EU certified, which is a requirement to get, as we learned, the local certification. But it still took us a long time to import it because there was no legislation for an EV above 3.5 tons. Cars, no problem, and we faced that, and we're working on that with the local government to get that done so we can really commercialize our whole range, because what goes for trucks goes for buses, etc. In terms of incentive, we should not forget the carbon credits. There should be, and I hope soon there will be, a program to support local fleets to obtain carbon credits for converting their fleet to EVs. Now, this is on the one hand. On the other hand, and we had a debate before the panel on that, is the whole charging network, because there are a lot of charging stations around Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So you buy your Tesla or whatever, sorry, yours is not available yet. And you don't have to worry, you have an app and you know where you can charge it. If you live in a villa, you're lucky enough, the OEM gives you a little charging device where you can charge at home. If you live in a high-rise with 3,000 other people, then it's a challenge. But anyway, you can deal with it. On a commercial vehicle, and we're right now in the testing phase, and we found out that there's exactly 5 chargers in Dubai and Abu Dhabi who are able to charge our truck. So this is certainly growing, yeah. But for us, the essence is, if a fleet customer wants to buy 50 or 100 trucks from us, we need to ensure he has in his depot a charging network. He needs chargers, he needs energy storage. So that's number 2. Number 3, and I don't want to bore you, but I'm telling you what we're facing every day, is even if you then have installed the charging network, then you may not have enough power in your facility. And then you need to go out and request that power, and that costs you time, and that costs you permissions, and it costs you a lot of money to get that additional power. So you take all that together, the barrier for the big fleets here commercially is very high to go green. Lucky enough, many of them have their own go green policies. The headquarters come and say you have a fleet of, I don't know, 100. By 2025, 30–40% of that fleet needs to be green, yeah, and then they start discussing how do we finance that, etc., and then it happens. So that is an opportunity for us in the first phase, but we need to get all parties around the table and fix all these, or overcome all these challenges in order to go beyond the political reason to buy an EV. We need to make it commercially viable, and that is a big challenge.
Okay, so we'll move from vehicles to, because you started talking about the infrastructure. Moving on to Abhilash and Bassam, who I think you're coming at this from the manufacturer, the supply, the distribution of the charging infrastructure, and I think in recent times we've heard that, some of the barriers to the take-up of EVs is, the cost. Well, the cost is coming down, particularly the batteries. The performance is improving. But then again, in people's top 3 reasons for not having an EV has always been, there's not enough charging infrastructure, or there's not the charging points. I may charge at home, which is fine, but if I'm going on a long journey, I want a rapid charger, and I want it, on this road, in the right place where I can, and enough quantity that I can access it without having to queue and wait 20 minutes for the next guy to kind of move on. In terms of your plans and your strategies for the development, the rollout of charging infrastructure, two points, I think. One is scaling up, and what are your views of the challenges of doing that? And as your organisations, how are you getting ready to scale up in GCC, in MENA? And then the other thing I think is the technology itself and the performance of, whether it's slow, rapid, super fast, even megawatt charging. How is the technology moving on so that it's actually able to keep pace with some of the kind of custom demands that you may be faced with? So maybe you want to take one of those each and...
So I could take the part about the development of the charging product and the technology, maybe the installation or how to implement the chargers. Abhilash can handle it. So from a technology point of view, first of all, yesterday we have announced that we deliver our first 1 millionth charger. So from ABB alone, there is 1 million charger already sold in different sizes. In different regions, Europe mainly, North America. For the GCC, at least we can say we have a range of 3,000 chargers sold in the GCC region. So the development is coming. It's not in the same speed of the Europe or North America, but it's on the way. Here in Dubai, we have around 77 DC chargers installed in different entities. Now the speed of charging and the technology of charging, you don't need always a fast charger. You have to identify your application. If you are an individual user, you want to charge at night and leave, home charging could be enough. If you are an organization and you have a few minutes to charge, then you need the fast charger. There's one question always coming. Is it harming the vehicle if I charge fast? Is it good to keep slow charging? So that giving you indication about the lack of knowledge about the charging technology. Moving the power to the vehicle faster or slower, yes, it's having an impact on the battery, but what is the impact? After many studies, they found that 5 years of using taxi cars charged only on fast chargers, compared to other cars with charging on slow charger, it's giving you only 3% impact on the fast charging. So 3%, if you look at the lifetime of the battery, we are talking about 5,500 cycles. So it's negligible. 5,000 cycles, if you turn it into kilometers, it's 1.2 million kilometers of driving. So it's nothing, the 2 or 3% in 5 years. From that fact, we are going up with the charging capacity. So in 2021 end, we have announced the fastest charger in the world. We call it Terra 360. It can give you 360 kilowatts from one socket, from one cable. It's a huge amount of power. You can imagine that the Villa here is taking like 10 or 20 kilowatt. This is 360 kilowatt. In my country, it's enough to give electricity for a village. So it's going from one socket. And the number of vehicles which can take that much power, still very few in the market. So there's 2 or 3 brands, which is 2021, 22 manufactured. And this is realistic. You cannot manufacture a car which can take a huge amount of power if there is no charger to give it. But by the time, we are seeing more cars can take that much of power. This charger, it can give you like 100 kilometer driving in 3 minutes. So the idea about 20 minutes or 1 hour waiting for charge, we are going to vanish. We are going to a normal practice of charging. Technology going up, but risk also going up. So the coordination between the vehicles, between the charging equipment, should be always up to date. The safety instructions, the safety layers to give this much of power, it should be also always developed according to the experience. In the heavy vehicles, we are going to another scale. We are going up to 600 kilowatts, which is almost one transformer. You can give it to a bus or to a van or to truck. And in that level of power, we can't leave it to human to interact, to use the plugs. So we are using automatic plugs. It's like rails more. But when you talk about 600 kilowatts for a bus, you can imagine that within 5 minutes, you are getting 20% of the battery size. So it will not be for a depot, not be for overnight charging. We call it opportunity charge. So you charge the bus at night with your regular charger, afternoon, after the bus doing like half of his journey or 60% of the working, and the battery is going low, just stopping during to drop off the passengers and load more passengers, you will get within 5 minutes, 10 minutes a good booster. Then you will continue the whole trip of the vehicle. So this size of chargers, it's allowing more luxurious cars, longer range, and attracting more people to start thinking about when I get my EV. And for that, of course, we need to develop the infrastructure. Otherwise, if you can't see in every street a charger free for you, you will not think about having EV car. You will think many times. You have to plan it. But if you start seeing always I can find EV charger free, then yeah, it will start coming to your mind to look for when I have my EV car. And here I think Abhilash, as one of our partners who's doing the installation and distribution of our chargers in UAE, he can take it from here.
Yep. I mean, a very valid point, which Bassam said, depends on how much power you want, that instantaneous power, and how much time it takes to charge the car. That's the battery capacity that we're talking about. Let's say you plan for a sedan like yours. It could have, might be 60 kilowatt hour of a battery, right? So that equals to 60 kilowatt for 1 hour, or 120 kilowatt for half an hour, or even 30 kilowatt for 2 hours. Still the same, right? So when you talk about the instantaneous power, that's when the importance of an infrastructure comes in. The infrastructure is designed for always a maximum capacity, so that anything lower than that can be catered to. But if your infrastructure, that is, might be your homes, let's start with the homes. Your homes have only 10 kilowatt. That's the maximum you can draw from there. You cannot put a 22 kilowatt or might be a 120 kilowatt charger at homes, right? But how about buildings? Common parking lots. These buildings do have parking lots, right? And they do have substations right there at the basement. It could be either from the distribution board, if it has adequate, breakers, or might be you'll have to modify the substation. So these are the two main, changes that we see from the hardware point of view. Be it a 150 kilowatt or 350 kilowatt, there are specific regulations that a regulator like DEWA, in Dubai has, or ADDC in Abu Dhabi has, or FEWA in the rest of the UAE. So you need to first decide, okay, how much energy am I going to need for this? It might be one 150 kilowatt charger, or for fleet application, it might be 10 150 kilowatt chargers. Then it becomes 150 into 10, plus a buffer as per the grid regulations. So then what happens? It might be 1 megawatt or 2 megawatts of power. When you go to DEWA for approvals, they're going to ask you, what is your instantaneous power? And the moment you say 1 megawatt, he's going to say, okay, you need to get at least 10 different approvals from, might be 3 different departments. Low voltage, medium voltage, high voltage, and might be from your transmission as well. This is the problem that as an integrator on the ground, we face. I'll give you an example. We did the EV bus pilot project for RTA, right? We started the discussion with RTA. Then RTA wanted it done. Then we got involved with DEWA to find the nearest substation. Then we found 3 substations. Out of that, one of them had enough load to do a 150 kilowatt. Then when we went to the approvals and stuff, we had to get 55 different approvals, from 14 different departments. And you know what is the size of that pantograph? 2 meter by 2 meter. That's the size of the entire charging station. Imagine getting 55 different approvals for just one product. The issue is this charger falls outside the building, but you also need a foundation for that unit to work, right? Something as heavy as a pantograph, the foundation itself is 8 tons. When you design an 8-ton foundation, where you have underground lines, waterways, primary transmission lines going through, you need to get the approval from all those departments. The engineering is extremely important over there. Similarly, when you do it for fleet applications, you need to make sure that the entry is adequate enough, the exit is adequate enough. When the vehicles are charging, there is sequential charging. One vehicle doesn't hinder the movement of the other. Then when we move on to autonomous vehicle discussions, where it's basically electric, you don't have anybody, actually monitoring them, right? In that case, you need to make sure that it's even more important to plan your route accordingly, to design your route accordingly. And when charging, you need to make sure that the vehicle doesn't move on its own. So all these fall under, the integrator's point of view. So what we do is we look at the full perspective, the vision, and then we design the electrical system based on that vision. So always I see customers coming to us and saying, okay, I want to have 10 vehicles in my fleet. But when we do the assessment, we don't even see energy for even one vehicle, because they're used to a flat ground where all these taxis or fleets are actually maintained, and the total load might be 5 or 6 kilowatt, and they're expecting to charge an entire set of trucks. It practically never happens. So when you plan for a fleet, you need to plan for it from the ground up. Plan it with the infrastructure. Don't wait until you buy the vehicle, and then search for charging. So this is what we want to inform the community, because this is what we are facing right now. You will not believe we have OEMs, who bring the vehicle and then struggle to find charging stations, and that's where we are right now. We have an influx of vehicles, but once the vehicle comes, that the reason is basically the dealers are used to showing the vehicles. But I've had a case where when they go for demo, the vehicle comes with 30% charge. Do you think your customer would be interested in driving around with 30%? It's not going to happen, because he's not going to, his basic KPIs are not met. So these are all the problems that we see, and the industry needs to catch up with the basic understanding of how to move to the EVs. And on the implementation side, it could be your office building, where a little bit of a behavioral change also happens. Right now, when we look at petrol vehicles, we usually fill petrol either from office or to office, right? Which is usually in the mornings or in the evenings. But with electric vehicles, what happens is the possibility of charging comes when you are in office, which is usually in the mornings. Then it balances out your complete electrical curve. So these are engineering discussions that you need to have. And I've also noticed that the vehicle team never discusses with the facility team. Because both are on completely different spectrums. Better to have them both together, discuss with both the KPIs and then implement EV charging. So these are just suggestions from actual problems that we have faced on the ground. Of course, approvals on one side, implementation on the other. Then comes the third part, which is the software behind it. Every EV charger needs a software to support.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So that's more. I mean, I can go one full day on this because there is a lot of things to come up. But I'll leave it to the next part of the discussion.
We could talk all afternoon about this. Just to bring in Lydia a minute, and just staying on the infrastructure side, because Total, you'll be looking at the infrastructure charging. I mean, firstly, anything to add to the extensive response from Bassam and Abhilash, but also just to bring in the wider energy supply issues, that the environmental impact of an electric vehicle is only as good as the source of the energy of the electricity that charges it. So there's limited use of an EV that's charged from a coal-fired power station, for example. At Total, when you talk about charging infrastructure, do you also put this in the context of the wider energy cycle and how, when I'm charging my electric vehicle, I can be confident, or I would like to know, whether the power is actually coming from a renewable source? Yeah.
So Yeah, in fact, I mean, one of the strategy of Total is not to be only the charge point operator when it comes to electric mobility, but what we are trying to do is to cover the entire supply chain. If we give an example for Europe, all the cities in Europe, we won the tenders based on the fact that on the top of providing a green solution, we are also providing a green electron, meaning that all the energy that is supplied through the charging infrastructure is a green energy. Hopefully, we will be able, I mean, to decline the same business model and the same ambitions in the Middle East. And ideally, wherever we can, we try to operate in the same way, and we try to cover the entire supply chain, meaning producing renewable energy, storing this renewable energy, and eventually selling this renewable energy through our network. Today, I mean, it will be very helpful and it will be very conducive for energy companies willing to expand and to develop the renewable energy sector to have a clear regulation and a clear regulatory framework when it comes to the supply of energy, and when it comes also to the operation of this charge point charging infrastructure. So for us, have the streamline of the regulation could be a very strong push and a very strong boost for the development of the renewable energy and for the development of the charging infrastructure in particular. So this is one of the key for us in order to be able to apply the same business model covering the entire supply chain. But on top of this, and just to come back on the challenges that, I mean, charging infrastructure operating are facing today, the market, the EV market, the EVC market in the UAE and in the Middle East in general is more oriented to the DC charging. For the audience, the DC charging, and I know that you know it, but the DC charging is a fast charging. Fast charging requires power, and finding location currently to install DC charging in the UAE is very challenging. Finding location with spare power enough and sufficient to provide a fast charging is very challenging. So this could be the renewable energy could be the solution for this challenge. Also, again, I'm insisting on the regulation. It has nothing to do with my background, but I believe that this is the base. A streamlined regulation is the base. Clarifying the legal framework, the regulatory framework is a key, and will be providing a conducive environment for the private sector to jump in this EV EV charging infrastructure. So for me, this is a key. And also, just to complete, I mean, the Abhilash intervention, I think that standardization will also help. Currently, I mean, there is 7 different Emirates. Today, we are starting working in 2 different Emirates. There's 2 different standards. So I believe that standardization can be a solution that can be worked on. It's an accessible solution, and it could help as well to make the environment a little bit more appealing. And there is a lot of also factor that sometimes can boost the EV infrastructure and sometimes can stop the EV infrastructure. And a good example of that is the technology. So sometimes we hear, oh yeah, technology is good because, I mean, we will develop the EV infrastructure and thus this will develop and the EV will pick. But sometimes the same technology and this continuous evolving of the technology can stop can be a blocking point, because people will always wait for the technology to install the right and appropriate infrastructure. But the technology will never come. So let's start with installing an infrastructure which is compliant with the environment, compliant with the territory, and then if needed, we can develop it. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think that was a point that was made this morning, that we shouldn't let the excellent be the enemy of the good. Absolutely. Sometimes. Absolutely. If it's good enough, then we do it.
Absolutely.
We are almost out of time, amazingly. Before we just go to the last question, is there any question or points from you, from the audience? Okay, the gentleman with his hand up. Yep.
Fascinating topic as usual. My name is Karine from Diamond Developers. Just one question to all of you involved in that industry. Any experience in solar-powered charging stations, whether DC or AC? And do you see an opportunity for that? Thank you.
Good question.
Kareem, I need to introduce you to our head engineer. He loves this idea of solar powered charging. And I'm sure you would love it as well, given what you do with Sustainable City. But yeah, it's something that he talks a lot about, and I'm sure it's something that, given where we are and given what we have, unlike actually the past month in Riyadh has felt like I've been living in a swimming pool, but apart from that, 11 months of the year, it is a perfect solution. And as my wife keeps pointing out to me, because I do have a Tesla in Riyadh, because we don't have any Ceer cars out yet, but she keeps pointing out to me, my car cannot do the range from Riyadh to Bahrain, so I was a little bit silly for buying an EV rather than a combustion engine. So I would be very happy with solar chargers on the road between Riyadh and Bahrain. It's one solution which is, yeah, it is ideal for where we are.
Just to add, with the current technology, it is definitely possible.
30 seconds.
Yep. Yeah, that's it. With the current technology, it's definitely possible. There are some discussions. I've done it before in other parts of the world. In this part of the world, it's definitely there. One thing is, as long as you don't go back to Deva or Seva and use it in-house, should not be a problem. Yeah.
Okay. Very quickly, one more question here. No.
Maybe I can ask a question in the meantime. I have another mic. A great discussion, but I have 2 points to raise. And taking a step back and looking at the screen behind you, it says sustainable mobility, e-mobility, and smart mobility. And the other point which is linked to that is that we're always focusing on the panel. And here it's mostly OEMs and technology providers, but we have a consultant on the stage. So that's a question for you, Jonathan. Is all there is to sustainable mobility, EVs and charging infrastructure, or are we missing some discussion on the wider sustainable mobility topic?
Okay, if we weren't just out of time, that was the last point I was going to cover in the final set of questions, because sustainable mobility is more than electrification. And I will actually pass it back to the panel. You have 30 seconds each.
Sure.
To say, forget electrification, what is the most important thing you would recommend we do to get net zero in our transport system, which is not electric?
Yeah, understood.
30 seconds.
So infrastructure is not for the now. It is something that needs to work for the next, might be 10 years, 12 years, right? So it's not just electrification, but also hydrogen, in the long run is definitely a possibility. Specifically for, long haul heavy vehicles. You don't want to put heavy batteries and, reduce your load, right? So we do see hydrogen also being another option. there's also a discussion where the powertrain might still be electric, but change the batteries into hydrogen fuel cells. So it's still under discussion, so there are several other points that are currently there. If the infrastructure persists and still there's evolution going on, there could be more.
Okay, so hydrogen, Bassam?
So there is more than electrical solutions, but there's many studies about the other solutions and how effective is that, and what is the cost to build a new infrastructure like for hydrogen as example, comparing to the electrical. What is the impact of using the hybrid comparing to electrical? And most of that studies conclude that the electrical is the easiest way, the fastest approach, and the simplest development on the infrastructure. With all complication we have mentioned, if you go for other option, you will have 10 times complications.
Okay, Alex?
Okay, I work for an automotive OEM, but I want to say something which is very off in terms of the response. We need to redesign our communities and our cities. It's as simple as that. We need to be able to walk more, bicycle more, and we're seeing it in some parts of the region. For example, in Riyadh and Diriyah, they're designing it so it's fully pedestrian. But if we want to get to be the ultimate sustainability, that's what we've got to think more about. How do we redesign where we live?
Okay, Lily?
From two perspectives. From a private sector perspective, I think that it's not only the e-mobility, it's not only the electric. That's why we are also massively doing a research and development on alternative fuel. It can be the biofuel, it can be the e-fuel, it can be the hydrogen as well. From a government perspective, I will completely follow Alex in his thought. I think that we need to completely redesign, the cities and go into an urban system whereby we need to walk, we need to cycle a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay. And Frank?
Yeah, 6 months, in 6 months of a year I would not cycle in the UAE. Probably it's my age, but it's just too hot. Now, what I want to say is sustainability. I think we have to see it from different angles. Sustainability for the planet, yeah. What ensures that also in 50 years we can live on this planet and we can also move on this planet? I think that's one question. On the other hand, we should also, or not forget, the commercial sustainability, because somebody needs to build the vehicles, somebody needs to sell them, somebody needs to buy them, and we can do whatever we want. The goods we all order, they come with a vehicle. And even more in these times, my kids, they don't go to a shop anymore. They order a vehicle and they order their stuff and it's brought to them. Blame them, shame on them. I mean, they're gonna live much longer than I am. Yeah, they have to live in that planet. So I think, to your point as well, it's on us to define what sustainability is. Yeah, and whether it's biofuels, big discussion in Europe and Germany specifically about whether this is good or not. E-mobility, we talked about it. Yeah, where does the power come from? I don't think it's at this stage relevant where the power comes from. I think our awareness needs to go into the direction of we need to change. We have a problem. We need to change. Whether the electricity comes from a coal power plant or from a wind power plant is not relevant at the moment. We need to go down that route. That's the most important thing for me.
Excellent. So I think you asked me the question. I would just agree with everything that everyone has just said. If I answered the question, I would probably be closer to Alex and Lilia in terms of how do we plan our cities? How do people, what's the demand for transport? How do people move? Do you even need to drive at all? Can you walk or cycle? Can we design cities where people walk, cycle, maybe use e-scooters if it's that hot part of the year when it's a little more difficult. So I think it would be a bit more than that. I think the other point I would probably put into the wider sustainability argument is around the circular economy. Where do the raw materials, whether it's electric vehicles and electric bus, where do the raw materials come from for the battery, for the vehicle itself? How do we get more of that being recycled rather than digging it out of the ground? So that's partly an energy argument, but it's partly resources argument, and that's a much bigger issue. We are out of time. And mobility always overruns. Every single time I do one of these, we always overrun, and this is no different. It's been a great discussion. We can continue it, I think, in the coffee break, so thank you very much.